within family systems, like the horrific example of child molesting or something along those lines. There really are people that are doing this, and they don't always own up to it, or then they'll say to the person they're doing it to, well, you need to learn about these sex things before you get older. Now, that's a horrific thing to do to anyone. It can cause a lifetime of work that needs to be done to become able to function in society.
Yeah.
And I've counseled people that have been through this, so I know what I'm talking about. I can tell you that it's those kinds of behaviors that seem to be done behind closed doors and behind the veil of privacy that then directly create the imprimatur for groups like the Illuminati to be able to function. Because what they're doing is they're grounding in this love of ritual abuse that takes place in secrecy behind closed doors with all these agreements and handshakes and secret passcodes and stuff that makes it so nobody knows what's going on, nobody knows what they're up to.
Right.
Just like the father that's raping his daughter at night, and then she goes off to school and has her pigtails in her lunchbox, and nobody knows that she's being raped. That's what's causing this stuff. If we can up-level our own humanity to each other and represent an absolute moral standard, which is kind of what the American Constitution started off on, basically preserve free will. That's the only real law in the universe that's of any value other than love is honor each other's free will. Don't mess with people's free will.
And David, sorry to interrupt you here, but I
Sure.
got to raise this question here. But what about the fact, because this is kind of a moral dilemma here then, I guess, but what about these people that are inclined to be these kind of monsters, quote unquote, here? I mean, isn't it also their individual freedom to do what they want to do, if you follow me?
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying that it isn't. Those two things coexist. You do have people who are much more consciously negative than the father who basically is molesting his daughter behind closed doors late at night. You do have people who are very much aware of an elaborate spiritual philosophy. There's actually multiple strains of philosophy in the negative circles, although they all kind of center around similar concepts. And what makes it so hard for people who are coming from a heart center and a positive focus to understand is that these philosophies fundamentally are based on the idea that other people are not even fully human. They're not even fully conscious or awake, and therefore if they're still asleep, then they're of very little value. It's almost like the idea of herd animals, and you kill one animal in the herd and you're not really damaging the herd.
Right.
You've just kind of clipped some branches off. So they don't really see other people as having value until they go through enlightenment. And then they define what that enlightenment is, and they define the parameters of it, and the enlightenment that they define includes the fact that you're not bound by any of these moral and ethical codes that most people find themselves so fascinated with. They see that as a manifestation of weak-mindedness. So they basically believe that that's why it's a Luciferian philosophy, that all the things that the Christian faith would tell you that you shouldn't do, they say, well, do those and more. Do everything that you want and don't have any repercussions or consequences, because basically God, one of their basic beliefs is that God doesn't exist except as a prime mover that created these impersonal laws of how the universe functions. And then God withdrew and basically went off to do his own thing somewhere else.
Right.
And we're all here with just this cosmic machinery, including the idea of radiant mind energy and the fact that you can harness that radiant mind energy and begin actualizing manifestation with it. They've known this all along. That part of the movie The Secret was very much true. Thing is that when you start using your intent, there's two ways you can intend. You can intend to help others, and you can intend to help yourself. They don't have to be separate. But if you're focusing all your intent on how to increase your status and your power and your money and your position, then what will start to happen is that you will want to join up with other people who are consciously intending to increase their status, money, power, and position. And in order to make the most ruthless and dedicated effort to increase your money, status, power, and position, you have to overlook these niggling little moral codes that say that you shouldn't kill somebody if he's trying to stop you from getting where you're going, or you shouldn't, sleep around, or whatever it is that your issues are. These people that are very focused on personal ambition, they will spare no expense to get ahead, and they will go and gravitate towards other people who feel the same way. And it's even more cool when you have a hidden evil philosophy that links it all together. Now, they're fascinated by this stuff. They love it. And I study it with a degree of compassion because I understand what it's like, because I've seen enough of their movies. You watch these horror movies, and the bad guys are always the ones that have all the supernatural magic powers, and then the good guys are just fighting them with true grit and, kind of like whatever weapons they can scrounge, like the silver bullet or the stake through the heart if it's a vampire, but right. It's always the villain that has all the levitation powers and all the mind control and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they definitely have a very inflated sense of themselves. And it is true in the sense that if you look at what's going on in the world, a great deal of the trouble that we have can be attributed to this so-called negative elite and the influence that they wield over commerce and media and infrastructure. But what's happening is, even with things like Hillary Obama, as I said in my audio blog this week, I can't believe how blatant she got to actually come right out and analogize this election with RFK's assassination. And then to further veil it in the plausible deniability that, this doesn't have anything to do with Obama. I'm just drawing an example.
Right.
But then, of course, the Fox News anchor comes out and says, well, Osama, Obama, what's the difference? It would be nice if both of them got knocked off. So this is really showing people, okay, when you're up at this level in the top of the pyramid, so to speak, there's such a disdain for life and basic compassion and kindness. If you were thinking from a kindness space, if you were thinking from a heart space, you wouldn't dream of making an analogy that might inspire some lone gunman to go and kill your opponent in a political race. You wouldn't even dream of it. It would be like you just would edit the words before they come out of your mouth. Any good politician knows how to make sure that they don't say something they don't want to say.
Right.
Anytime you've been in a dysfunctional relationship, you make one mistake in that relationship and you're done. Say one thing that'll be brought up forever.
Well, exactly, you're right. They have, if not hundreds of speechwriters, working on whatever they're going to say every twist and turn. So an idea like this obviously spawns, what I'm getting at is why Hillary would say a thing like this potentially then might be because they're looking for someone to gun down Obama. Is that what you're saying here?
Exactly. It's like, by the way, this is not necessarily over, and if you really want to see me as president, here's one way it could happen.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And it's unthinkable, but yet it's like somebody. I love this analogy, and I might use it in a film if I'm writing another film at some point. That somebody is having a perfectly calm, rational conversation with you, and they're sitting across from you at a table. And in the middle of this totally sober, eye-to-eye conversation, they pull out a gun and they just rest it on the table, pointed at you. And they never talk about the fact that the gun is there. But there it is. And I call that putting the gun on the table.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she did with this. Everybody's calm. Everybody's just like, okay, there it is. But there's the gun on the table.
And it's also, I guess, because, just before here, we were talking about this idea that they know how to manipulate, if you will, these kinds of spiritual forces that are in play in our world. And to me, then, this also means that they're inserting this idea into the mass consciousness, meaning that, the more people that potentially are focusing on this, the more potential this could become a reality,
Absolutely. There's no question that there are hypnotic cues involved and people who may have had some sort of amnesic barrier where if you break through that, they might go out and do these things.
Sure.
There's plenty of evidence that that's been done. The Ewan Cameron stuff and MK Ultra and all that.
And of course, what I want to ask at that point is, but would that actually matter anyway? As you refer to yourself, you mentioned that these are the guys at the top of the pyramid, the visible pyramid, as it were. These are the politicians that we are handed and that we are supposed to fight over and so forth. But to me, at this point, it doesn't matter either if Obama or Hillary gets in there, or what's the other guy called, McCain. I mean, does it matter to you?
I would say it does matter. I've actually contributed to Obama's campaign. I'm not going to even hide that. I mean, all those things are public anyway. But I've had a lot of dreams about Obama, which suggests that he is more the type of person who represents this fourth density consciousness that the Earth is moving into. And I think nobody saw this coming. The negative elite have a really racist perspective. They actually see other races as not on the same level as white people, and that has to do with Atlantean teaching that the white race was created by an alien mixture with ETs, that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten the white skin. And that it is possible that the white skin is the result of some sort of genetic mixture that happened like that. That does not at all mean that white people are in any way, mind, body, spirits, superior to others.
Of course, yeah.
Even if the genetic material is different a little bit, it doesn't mean anything. Now, that's the research that they claim to have documentation for and proof for, and that in turn leads them to feel that there's a superiority in the white race. All of this stuff that Hitler was into and all that gets back to this Atlantean knowledge and secret documents that say that this is what happened. And it's just ridiculous. You look at the DNA, for example, there isn't even any DNA marker that allows us to differentiate one race from another. That mystery has still yet to be solved, because when you actually sequence the genome, there's nothing there. And furthermore, we now have absolute concrete evidence that DNA can shift by the focus of consciousness. You can actually change the structure of DNA by your consciousness, and therefore the whole idea of bloodlines, that they say, well, you know, we got to keep the purity of the bloodline because this particular strain has, you know, is the King David strain, and this particular strain is the Jesus' kids strain, and this particular strain goes back to Atlantis and the gods, and, you know, DNA is very malleable, and it very much interfaces with consciousness, and so there is no reason to assume that because you have a particular bloodline, that in any way makes you superior to someone else. Yeah. Consciousness is the king of the structure of DNA, absolutely. And there was a new study that just came out that proves that, if you want me to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, David.
Well, there's this Italian wall lizard called Podarcus sicula, and it's just a lizard that is found indigenously throughout the world. We have them here in California, and I see them in my backyard sometimes. And there were two islands in the South Adriatic Sea, Pod Capisti and Pod Mercaru, and the lizards originally on Pod Capisti were adapted evolutionarily wise to eat insects, because it's basically a desert island, so there isn't much vegetation, so there's just little critters running around, and then the lizards eat the critters. So 36 years ago, in 1971 is when this happened, and then 36 years later they went back and looked at these lizards. Scientists came in and took 5 adult breeding pairs of these lizards and transported them from the desert island to an island that had lush tropical vegetation. This meant that now the lizards were totally able to have as much plant material as they want and completely changed the scope of their diet. Now, this island, Pod Mercaru, had never had any of these lizards on it before. It was completely sanitized from those strains up until then. So then what happens is they go back 36 years later, and they find the descendants of these original lizards, and they actually cut off little pieces from the end of their tail and did DNA testing just to make sure that they could tell where the parentage came from. And, in fact, it was the same parents. Now, here's the thing that's so phenomenal. These lizards showed incredible, and I mean incredible, genetic changes that changed the structure and the function of their bodies in order to be able to eat plants in 36 years, which completely blows Darwin's model out the door. You cannot say that these are random mutations, that certain lizards survived better because they had a random mutation that let them eat plants better. No. Right. What this is saying is, you put these little guys down in vegetation,